weeknights at 6 p.m. Eastern. Brett, always good to see you. So a lot of calculations go into getting us to this point. By the way, I'll be talking with Alaska's governor coming up, and we'll start to talk about what those were. What are the politics of all of this? Are there any at play here?
Of course. I mean, there's politics we've talked about many times about the two crises we're facing, the health crisis and the economic crisis. And people at home and dealing with businesses are coming to a point where some of them are saying, I'm ready. I'm ready to take the chance that we as a country can move forward. Now, the customer, the citizen, has a say in all of this. And you can open doors to businesses, but you have to have people that want to do it. So that's where the guidelines come in place. They're not a flicking of a switch. It's a nuanced rollout. But there could be blowback, Harris, for somebody who waits too long, and in the interim, businesses falter or there is some negative economic effects, just as if they go too soon and the health, impacts flare up. I think both ways have political impacts.
Look, Brett, we're all reading the same material. We see Dr. Fauci of the National Institutes of Infectious Disease. We know what the experts are saying about a second wave. And I'm not hearing the word potential as often as we had in the beginning of that reporting. A second wave alongside with influenza this fall. Is there a calculation that maybe whatever we do now could help that situation, or it's coming anyway, and so just get everybody out working again? I'm just curious to know what you're learning about that.
And listen, I'm talking to a lot of folks, and they're pretty convinced that there will be some kind of second iteration of the virus, but believe that we as a country will be better prepared at that moment. Whether the shelter in place applies to people who are vulnerable and over a certain age, by that point, who knows? Whether it is a complete shutdown, it seems like we are learning as we go more about this virus. The hope is that by the fall, there'll be at least some significant treatments that we know work, short of a vaccine that is probably months away from that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the push, because we are still so far out from a vaccine, so we're being told potentially. There's also this development today. Top Democrats are continuing to remain silent on sexual assault allegations leveled against presidential candidate Joe Biden. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer have yet to make a public comment about a former Biden staffer, Tara Reade, who claims Biden attacked her in 1993. And then over the weekend, the hashtag #DropOutBiden trending on Twitter, with some Bernie Sanders supporters on the site calling for Biden to suspend his campaign. Brett, what do you make of this?
Well, listen, I think, they haven't commented in part because I'm pretty sure they haven't been asked. I mean, from what I've seen, I haven't seen the question asked to either the former vice president or to any of his surrogates or top Democrats. Obviously, you saw the New York Times do a kind of self-reflection about its coverage of Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court justice now, and what happened with those allegations and the coverage of it, and what is happening now. The disparity is pretty stark, and I think questions are fair. I haven't heard them.
Questions are fair.
I don't think I've heard them answered.
So there is one exception to that, and this only just happened, that we know of in the last little while. Amy Klobuchar left it to the New York Times when asked about it. Brett, she said that there's been an investigation. The Times did that investigation. But Brett, to your point, I mean, these aren't just folk who are or are not being asked the question about Joe Biden and Tara Reade and whether or not the sexual assault happened. These are, I mean, asking Joe Biden that question, these are people who wanted to run for president. I mean, these are people who, when you ask the question and they're coming up and endorsing, Nancy Pelosi endorsed Joe Biden today. These just aren't, these are our lawmakers, some of whom wanted to run this country. So asking them the question is like an emergency.
Right. And listen, if you just look at the facts, there is more here than there were to some of the allegations that got a ton of coverage in the Brett Kavanaugh case. I think that disparity is the greatest disparity for journalism. Whether you can find out the truth by asking questions, you can at least ask the questions.
All right, we will move on to this. The battle over China's role in the pandemic now seems to also be taking a political turn. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy yesterday went after China's lack of transparency. Let's watch.
Now we see a own study by Southampton that had China been honest with the world, 95% of this never would have happened. What China has done has directly led to American deaths.
While Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the president's travel ban on China was ultimately a failure. Let's watch.
Tens of thousands of people were still allowed in from China. So it wasn't as it is described as this great moment. If you're going to shut the door because you have an evaluation of an epidemic, then shut the door.
So, Brett, let's start there, because the reports are as many as 40,000 people still came in after that ban was put in place. It was, you know, I guess I'm mostly curious about how that happens. I know that there are expats all around the world. I don't know the configuration of those people coming into the country. Have we learned any more about that?
No, we do need to find out more about those flights that came in. Those international flights were going all throughout that time. And while there were people who were refused entry on the China side from leaving into the U.S., obviously there are some, and in the thousands, that managed to come in. That said, it's a little interesting to hear Speaker Pelosi talk like that if you say that the original shutdown was xenophobic and you were in the streets of San Francisco saying you should march in you know, in Chinatown during that time. I think that that's, you know, we have to look back at that time. Today, Harris, U.S. officials are saying that they, looking at the data in China, see that China's numbers on the coronavirus could be 50 times what China said they were originally. And that's analysis from U.S. officials coming out today.
So on Friday, we were saying that it could be 4 times more. Doctors were telling me they thought it could be 10 to 20, and now we're up to 50. I think it's safe to say we don't know. And, you know, with talk and reports of them having vacuumed up materials that kept the rest of us around the world from having the protective equipment that we would need. Brett, real quickly, what does the relationship with China look like right now with the United States?
I think it's shaky, definitely shakier. And, you know, we're still in the middle of trade discussions and all kinds of discussions around the world. But there is now bipartisan pushback to China. It is not just the Trump administration or Republicans. How China has acted since the beginning, and we still don't know the origin story, but since the beginning forward has united this country, and it's going to change U.S.-China policy.
Yeah, it's so interesting what you said about House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, though. It was too much when the president put his travel ban with China on the line, and now it's not enough going back and forth with quite a few nasty words used in between. Brett Baer, we will see you at 6 p.m. Eastern on the special report. Thank you very much.
Looks like you will.
Good to see you.
All right, Harris, thanks.
Yes. Oh, I keep my promises.